Emmanuel-Thomas was once a standout product of Arsenal's Hale End academy, a youth system known for producing technically gifted players with a strong footballing IQ. At over 6 feet tall, he stood out not only for his physical presence, but also for his uncommon versatility. Coaches often pointed to his ability to play across the midfield and forward lines, pairing athleticism with composure on the ball. In 2009, he captained Arsenal's U18 team to an FA Youth Cup victory, a milestone that seemed to signal the beginning of a major professional career. He made his senior debut for Arsenal in a League Cup fixture in 2010. It was a brief appearance, but symbolic. For many, it was proof that another Hale End product was making the leap. However, like many emerging players in elite clubs, consistent first-team opportunities were limited. Emmanuel-Thomas was soon sent out on loan, a common route for developing players in England. Stints at Blackpool, Doncaster Rovers, and Cardiff City gave him game time, but none resulted in a permanent breakthrough at Arsenal. In 2011, he transferred to Ipswich Town in the Championship. There, he experienced a more regular role and contributed, with goals and assists. His performance drew praise, and for a time, it seemed like he had found stability. But the pattern of short stays and transitions would soon define the next phase of his career. Over the following years, he played for Bristol City, Rotherham United, Gillingham, and even Livingston in the Scottish Premiership. His impact varied from club to club. While there were moments of success, including goals in key fixtures, the frequency of transfers pointed to a career in flux. Appearances became more sporadic. Roles were less defined. The trajectory no longer resembled that of a rising star, but rather a professional navigating the outer edges of competitive football. By his late 20s, Emmanuel-Thomas had worn many shirts, but the consistency that defines long-term success remained. Elusive, though still active, his presence in top-level discussions had largely faded. The story of a once-celebrated academy talent was quietly drifting from memory. As the years progressed, Emmanuel-Thomas became a familiar name in the lower tiers of English football. His time at Bristol City included flashes of form. He contributed to the club's attack and appeared in over 80 matches. However, his stay lasted only 2 seasons before he moved on again. The consistency that had once been hoped for never truly materialized. He signed for Queen's Park Rangers in 2015, but struggled to establish a first-team presence. Loan spells followed at Milton Keynes, Dons and Gillingham. Each move brought new surroundings, new systems, new teammates, but rarely a sense of permanence. Though still young by professional standards, Emmanuel-Thomas had entered a phase of his career marked more by movement than momentum. He signed for Thai club PTT Rayong, a decision that surprised many in English football circles. However, the contract was terminated before he played a match. The move reflected the uncertainty surrounding his career, whether driven by opportunity or necessity. It signaled how far removed he had become from the expectations of his early days. In 2020, he signed with Livingston in Scotland. The deal offered another chance at rebuilding his profile in a top-flight setting. He scored a few goals and appeared in both league and cup competitions, but once again, the spell was short-lived. His contract was not renewed beyond the initial season. Afterwards, he played briefly for Aberdeen but failed to make a lasting impact. By 2022, Emmanuel-Thomas was without a club and without a clear path forward. No public statements suggested retirement, but there were no transfer rumors, no training appearances, no interviews. The silence surrounding his name grew louder. With time, while many footballers take unconventional routes through their careers, the pattern in Emmanuel-Thomas's journey was difficult to overlook. The frequency of his club changes, combined with his gradual disappearance from the media landscape, reflected a career slowly unraveling in the background. That from promising academy product to football nomad, the descent had been gradual but unmistakable. In February 2024, Emmanuel-Thomas became the subject of headlines once more, but not for reasons related to football. Reports emerged, detailing his involvement in a large-scale drug operation. He was arrested and charged with conspiracy to supply cannabis, a charge linked to the transportation of a significant quantity of the substance across England. Authorities had uncovered encrypted communications, tracking data, and other forms of digital evidence connecting Emmanuel-Thomas to the organization. According to official reports, the drugs involved were valued at over £600,000. The case suggested a high degree of coordination, with multiple individuals playing roles in the distribution network. The investigation revealed that Emmanuel-Thomas had not merely been associated with the operation, but had actively contributed to its logistics. Surveillance footage and intercepted messages placed him at the center of planning efforts. For law enforcement, it was enough to move forward with formal prosecution. The football world responded with disbelief, while his name had largely faded. From active competition, he remained a known figure among fans who remembered his early potential. Media coverage highlighted the contrast: how a player once tipped for success at Arsenal had now found himself facing serious criminal charges. During his court appearances, Emmanuel-Thomas remained reserved. Reports described his demeanor as subdued, focused more on the legal process than on public reaction. Legal representatives acknowledged the gravity of the case and emphasized cooperation with the court. In May 2024, he pleaded guilty to the charge. The court sentenced him to 4 years in prison. The ruling brought closure to the legal process but opened a broader conversation in the public sphere about the challenges faced by professional athletes after the game and the environments they may enter when their careers end abruptly. The sentencing marked a turning point, not just in his legal status, but in how his story would be remembered. No longer just a tale of unmet expectations, it had become a case study in collapse of talent, opportunity, and decision-making. A line had been crossed, and there would be no return to the field. After the sentencing, Emmanuel-Thomas disappeared from public view. There were no interviews, no statements, no final reflections offered to fans or the media. The silence was total, both from the player himself and from a football world that had long since moved on. In the years leading up to his arrest, Emmanuel-Thomas had already fallen off the radar. Once considered among the brightest young talents at one of Europe's most prestigious academies, his absence from the sport had become unspoken but accepted. The criminal conviction, however, placed a definitive end to any speculation of a late career return. Football, like any global industry, has its stories of redemption and revival, but it also carries examples of isolation: players who exit the system without direction or support. Emmanuel-Thomas's case drew renewed attention to the structural gaps in post-career planning, mental health resources, and transition programs. For athletes leaving professional sport under difficult circumstances, his name now exists, less in discussions of skill or potential, and more as a reference point used in articles, interviews, and podcasts to illustrate how quickly a career can unravel. Youth academies continue to cite examples like his when addressing new generations of players about the dangers of complacency, mismanagement, and off-the-pitch distractions. While the legal consequences are finite, reputational outcomes are not. Emmanuel-Thomas's achievements on the field have been permanently shadowed by events off of it. Clubs that once promoted him as a future star now avoid commentary. Former teammates have largely stayed silent. There is no farewell match, no tribute post, no legacy within the game's archives beyond archived footage, and now, legal records. The football community has filled the silence with lessons: cautionary, somber, and deeply reflective. For some, he remains a name from a youth team roster. For others, a reminder that talent without direction is rarely enough. And for the sport itself, his story lingers as a quiet echo of promise lost, and of what is left unsaid when a career ends not in retirement, but in retreat.